so very happy to be here with you and with my colleague Rob and Lucinda. We've been working with you in your community for quite a while now, and so it's a special treat to be able to be together directly. I'm going to speak just for a few minutes about the project, its ideas, and some of the special qualities that it has and what it's trying to do. When we're working together, yes, that's so satisfying. We're drawing together quite a number of disciplines. Some of us are professionals. We're quite deeply grounded in technology and quite deeply grounded in science. We also have families. We're also community activists. We also think about the future altogether. And the kinds of questions that we're asking in this project are ones that speak very directly about how we might build our environment in the future. Some of the questions we ask when we work on that kind of thing are rather solemn ones, rather serious ones. What is happening in the earth today? Can we believe that things are secure? Can we rely on the integrity of nature? Do we feel that this planet is a whole, has a future, is moving in a good direction? I don't think any of us could really feel complacent or completely secure when we ask that kind of question, because of such turbulence and such tremendous change that is happening around us. But perhaps in addition to the rather serious responses, we could also have some optimism that is quite justified. Perhaps we could even work slightly playfully with curiosity about possibilities in order to generate a kind of creative, whole, healthy future by working very directly on technology, by fostering ways of learning, by having demonstration projects that are right at home, very tangible, and that can build outward into a way of working with the community and with technology and with the environment that really can justify an optimism. And I hope that I'll be able to justify that kind of sense by showing you some examples of the projects that we're working on. If we think about that insecure world, then it would be very tempting to close things down and to try to have a kind of a tight jacket, minimum consumption kind of model. And that kind of effort, of course, is essential to learn about carbon counting, to learn about absolutely careful use of energy. And yet at the same time, there's a danger along with that care of closing down and making things absolutely just stuck and not believing that we can move forward. There are some very particular techniques that we're trying to foster which are not about hardening boundaries and gathering as much territory and security for ourselves. Rather, we're trying to foster a way of designing and working that has as much extension and as much involvement, as much kind of interrelationship as possible. And that translates into very practical design principles and also translates into a kind of collaboration in which we would never think that we could solve a problem or own it ourselves. By taking multiple disciplines together and by weaving a whole, we can perhaps move into a new way of working, a working that is not afraid of complexity or resilience or adaptation, but rather takes those kind of terms and really makes it into a new language that can work with all of us. And so his hope then is to be able to create a tremendous kind of fertility out of what we make, out of what we weave together, and out of what we organize within communities. Things that reach outward and build a new surface of the earth and new multiple relationships. This project starts then with a sense of touch and intimacy in which each of us is involved, making very small, gentle kind of extensions that lie around our own bodies by very carefully designing individual elements that are sensitive and that might move and shift as a rather fresh kind of architecture, building a sense of sensitivity around us. And when we continue to work that way, then on top of that kind of individual set of layers, we put in actuators and sensors and microcomputers and weaving things together. We start to build systems that can move and respond and ripple out, creating a very gentle kind of environment that might move and live with us. A rather different sense of architecture than the inert stage and the kind of closed walls of traditional buildings. Something that might instead foster a kind of mutual relationship between us all. This has resulted in a series of projects such as what we can see here, the Venice Biennale, where we have many layers of very lightweight structures, clothed with mechanisms, clothed with computation, and even a bit of chemistry. And when you move into these environments at first, the atmosphere might be very still at first, looking at these very, very lightweight structures woven out of digital fabrication, clothed lightly with mechanisms, but then when you move through them, space sensors start to track your motion and you get little ripples of response. And as things start to become more involved, we discover that this environment is very much like walking in a woods, or perhaps in a garden, a sense that things are almost alive, at least certainly responsive and listening and working with you. It's a very curiously kind of satisfying sense when we start to build things that can talk back and be curious. The organizations of these projects are quite practical. We look very systematically at layers of scaffolding, structure, and then we lay computer systems through that to make them intelligent, sensing multiple small microprocessors that can talk to each other. So that's not necessarily just one big ruler organizing everything from above. Rather, it's many centers building up a kind of resilience and adaptation. By layering in those systems together, we set up a kind of community of relationships where signals get passed from part to part to part and rippling back and forth. And then all of those layers come together to make quite a crowded, vivid, fertile organization in which all of the things are speaking together and working. The individual elements have some technology back behind them, such as the sensors moving back to microprocessors and then rippling out into the actuators and mechanisms that you can see here. Alongside those kind of mechanical innovations, we're also going to work with quite robust systems that might be quite literally buildings of the future by working with metal and glass and very permanent materials and working with distributed, resilient, strong structures. If you compress these very lightweight meshworks together, perhaps we could imagine a literal building of the future. Perhaps we could imagine this as a roof or a wall. And so we test these things and work at architectural scale. We also lay in chemistries as well. And when I say chemistries, what I'm talking about is processing systems that might absorb carbon, take up carbon dioxide that we're breathing out, convert it into harmless materials such as carbonate like limestone, and converting the atmosphere as well. So the active sense of buildings is one of the things that we're trying to develop. Here we can see a little bit of that chemistry at work, and we see this particular formulation. This is a Traub cell in the exhibit right now, where the different glass flasks that you'll see in the exhibit are being housed and stimulated by our own behaviors, by our own movements through the space, which is being tracked, and then lights come on and stimulate the growth of the growth cells, and just have a very primitive start to a processing system. In addition to that, there's a sense of trading signals back and forth in the sense of a kind of composite intelligence in which many signals are chorusing back and forth, producing a very curious sense. It's not the same thing as a single robot that just does our bidding. Rather, it's a sense of being part of something, perhaps like being in a chorus of fireflies, perhaps a chorus of crickets, that sense of many different parts working together. And so I just want to emphasize again that along with the sense of quite complex systems, we build up in the most practical ways by starting with individual gestures, things that are comfortable to touch, things that might extend the realm of our own bodies, things that might even work like clothing, in the most practical, tangible ways, working with industrial products, working with quite sensitive materials, and trying to build personal relationships. And so I hope that might serve as a kind of a contribution to some future possibilities for architecture and the environment.
I'm here today with, can you tell us your name?
Mary Gutierrez.
Palestine?
Yes.
What did you think about the book Beesley at this exhibit? I thought it was amazing how it interacted, how it sensed just you walking by, just you passing, waving. It sensed you and it lights up. It was pretty cool.
What was your favorite part of that?
Just how it lighted up when I didn't even get close enough to it, and and it sensed me. Kind of. I didn't ask that many questions.
Are you going to be coming back?
I do. Without the kids, of course.
With?
Anita Parkstown.
And what did you think about the It Lives exhibit?
I was very curious of it's indescribable. You have to come and visit yourself. There is no way to describe his perspective of when you just take your hand against something and how it reacts to you. I totally appreciate it, and then after looking at everything, I could totally understand why the refrigerator door would open and the light would come on. But it's more than that. It's sort of something that really would apply to our future.
What was your favorite part of it?
Well, my favorite part was watching other people's reaction. They would be afraid to approach the exhibit, and then how someone that may have a warmer hand to a colder hand, watching other people.
Are you going to be coming back?
Yes, I'd like to bring quite a few youngsters.